Good afternoon. Ni hao. I am Prospero Cacayan, who will be presenting a paper on building stronger infrastructure, a literature review of ISO 9001 aligned disaster risk management protocols and their impact on public infrastructure resilience. To begin with, I am showing here the abstract. Let us look at the core of this research. This study investigates the efficacy of integrating ISO 9001 aligned disaster risk management protocols to enhance the resilience and performance of public infrastructure projects. My research explores how a well-established quality management system, or ISO 9001, can be leveraged to make our infrastructure more resilient. I focused on how this integration affects critical project outcomes, like staying on schedule and on budget, ensuring worker safety, and minimizing damage during a disaster. What I found is that while we know ISO 9001 is good for general quality, there is a significant gap, particularly the need for mixed method studies that combine quantitative metrics with qualitative insights. The findings underscore the necessity for empirical context specific research to develop actionable recommendations for policymakers and practitioners, ultimately aiming to fortify our public infrastructure against the growing threat of natural disaster. So this presentation will highlight those gaps and propose a path forward for future research. The problem we are facing is clear. The infrastructure that supports our economies and communities is at risk. Globally, and particularly in the Philippines, infrastructure projects are plagued by delays, budget overruns, safety hazards, and significant damage when disasters strike. The core issue is that while we build essential infrastructure, we often fail to build it to withstand these events. So this is where ISO 9001 comes in. It's a system designed to manage quality and risk. My research asks the question: can we use this existing, globally recognized framework to systematically improve this disaster resilience of our public work in projects? To analyze this problem, I have used two established theoretical lenses. The first is the Plan, Do, Check, Act, or the PDCA cycle. Being the foundation of ISO 9001, the PDCA cycle institutionalizes a methodology for continuous improvement, systematic monitoring, and corrective action. The second is disaster risk reduction, or DRR theory. This framework emphasizes proactive measures to identify and minimize vulnerabilities while enhancing adaptive capacities to disaster threats. So the integration of these two, the PDCA cycle with DRR principles, creates a structured yet adaptive framework for embedding resilience directly into the management of infrastructure project. So by combining these two, we can create a powerful framework for building resilience into the very DNA of our infrastructure projects. Looking at the existing literature, it is clear that the construction industry has already embraced ISO 9001. The standard mandates that organizations identify potential risks and implement mitigation strategies, a requirement that aligns directly with the principles of disaster preparedness. While evidence confirms that ISO 9001 adaptation enhances project efficiency and consistency, research on its specific impact on disaster related outcomes is limited. There is a clear lack of empirical work linking ISO 9001 based DRM protocols to tangible resilience outcomes in infrastructure projects. We have plenty of evidences or studies showing that ISO 9001 improves efficiency, but very few that investigate its direct impact on how a well-bridged road or building withstands a typhoon or an earthquake. This is a critical knowledge gap. On the other side of the equation, we have the Sindai framework for disaster risk reduction, which highlights the critical importance of strengthening the resilience of essential infrastructure. DRR research advocates for standard operating procedures, emergency preparedness, structural reinforcement, and robust stakeholder engagement as key strategies for building resilience. However, much of the existing DRR literature focuses on broad policy frameworks rather than on standardized, quality driven operational approaches. There is a recognized need for practical, validated models that embed standardized risk protocols into the routine practices of project implementation. Because there is a disconnect between these broad goals and the day to day realities of managing a construction project. So we need a practical tools that project managers can use. So, how can these two integrate? Let's break down by key performance indicator. First, schedule adherence. Disasters frequently disrupt project timelines. The proactive risk planning and monitoring mechanisms inherent in ISO 9001 can mitigate schedule slippage by identifying vulnerabilities early and ensuring a state of readiness. Second, cost control. Budget overruns are a common consequence of disaster-related disruptions. ISO 9001's emphasis on preventive planning, contingency resource allocation, and regular audits helps organizations maintain financial discipline during crisis. Third, the safety incident reduction. The principles of ISO 9001 naturally extend to safety management through systematic hazard identification and regular audits. This structured approach contributes to a reduction in workplace accidents, although research in a specific disaster context remains limited. Lastly, the damage reduction. By fostering proactive DRM, ISO 9001 aligned measures can theoretically reduce both structural and operational damages to infrastructure. This effect this effect is amplified when integrated with ERR mechanisms such as early warning systems. To truly understand if this approach works, we need to look at the problem from multiple angles. It's not enough to just count the numbers, how much money was saved, or how many days were not lost. We also need to understand the why and the hows. So the literature strongly suggests that a mixed method approach is the most effective way to evaluate the impact of DRM protocols. This approach captures both measurable outcomes and critical contextual factors. First, the quantitative indicators. Metrics such as cost savings, schedule adherence rates, and reduced incident numbers provide concrete evidence of impact. On the qualitative insights, the stakeholder interviews or case studies and analysis of organizational culture can explain the conditions under which these protocols succeed or fail, providing invaluable context. So, this combination of quantitative and qualitative data will give us a much richer and more accurate picture. In summary, my review of this literature has revealed three major gaps in our current knowledge. First, a lack of empirical evaluation of ISO 9001 aligned DRM protocols specifically focused on disaster resilience. Second, insufficient quantitative evidence connecting these standardized systems to measurable outcomes in schedule, cost, safety, and damage reduction. Third, a scarcity of mixed methods studies that integrate stakeholder perspectives with performance metrics to provide a holistic understanding. So, future research must prioritize real world case studies, longitudinal analysis, and mixed methods designs to generate actionable knowledge for both policy and practice. We need to track their performance over time, and we need to combine quantitative data with qualitative insights. In conclusion, the integration of ISO 9001 aligned DRM protocols offer a promising pathway to strengthening the resilience of public infrastructure. By embedding structured risk management into established quality systems, there is significant potential to improve key project performance indicators. However, the literature reveals a critical disconnect between the theoretical benefits and the available empirical evidence. Addressing the identified research gaps through rigorous mixed methods inquiry is essential. Such research will provide the evidence or the evidence base needed for policymakers and infrastructure managers to confidently institutionalize resilience in our public work projects, ensuring that they can withstand the challenges of an uncertain future. By focusing future research on filling the gaps I've identified, we can build that evidence based. This will empower the both stakeholders to make informed decisions and ultimately to build a future where our critical infrastructure is truly resilient. Thank you very much.